Sudhanshu Mittal, the original bill required 70% consent for landowners for PPP projects and 80% for private companies. Now, after your amendments, if private companies are involved in defense, rural infrastructure or affordable housing, or if they choose to locate themselves in what you call industrial corridors, they will not have to abide by the consent clause or the social impact clause. And I put it to you, they therefore will be clearly benefiting. And therefore, when Congress claims that selective companies in these 5 fields will benefit, they are correct.
Karanji, if you rightly recollect, the entire issue of crony capitalism came from the escalation in the cost of housing in townships which were built by private entities, or industries, which were land acquired for industries or land acquired for SEZs and all that. These were the fundamental acts which raised the entire issue of compensation and crony capitalism. Let me read out, for the benefit of my friend, the exceptions.
No, just a moment. I'm going to stop you there. I don't want you to read anything out. You aren't addressing the question I put to you. I'm not talking of crony capitalism. That's a different thing. I'm saying to you, let me finish.
When it comes to a private sector company.
Let me finish.
When
I'm
it
saying
comes to a
something.
private
Mr.
sector
Mittal.
company doing a project for national security, I'm sure that it is a welcome amendment. If the exemption is for the purpose of national security, surely it should be granted. If the purpose of exemption is for defense, it should certainly be granted.
What about the exemptions? What about the exemptions in industrial corridors, which would be a large swathe of territory for all sorts of companies, whether they are defense or not? Those could be mass production companies for consumer durables, right? That's an exemption granted. Now, that is an exemption that benefits private enterprise, possibly at the cost of farmers, possibly at the cost of other interests.
No.
That's the opposition criticism.
The industrial corridor is a contiguous large stretch of land along for a corridor to be developed as an integrated industrial township with housing and all. It's a government project. It is not an individual who is developing an industrial corridor or a business house or a capitalist entity which is developing it. So when the government plans an integrated industrial corridor, it takes care of the social requirements of that area, it takes care of the commercial requirements, it takes care of the housing requirements, the affordable, it takes care of everything.
All right.
So that is the reason.
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Mittal. I'm going to stop you there. I want to bring in a second potential problem. And it's the very thing you were talking about a moment ago, the so-called industrial corridors. Now, the problem is that term industrial corridor is not defined in India either by the government or by law. As the Business Standard today points out, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, just to take that as an example, is 1,483 kilometers long with a band of 150 kilometers on either side. That alone amounts to a total of 4,44,900 square kilometers.
14% of land area of India.
There you
That's
are.
the influence area. 17% of India's population we are talking about.
Let me finish. If you have 5 or 6 such industrial corridors in the country, which clearly the government
40%.
plans, a large swathe of India will suddenly be exempt from the consent clause as well as the social impact clause. Is that really justified? Surely you need to more narrowly define the term industrial corridor.
First, again I am saying, the compensation packet was the criticality of the Land Acquisition Act. Why? Because earlier the compensation paid for the land was 1/5 of the cost of the market price. Today, you are having twice the market price when it comes to the urban area and 4 times the market price when it comes to rural area.
Mr. Mittal, I'm interrupting you. I'm interrupting you for a simple reason. We know that the compensation is not altered. The same level of compensation as envisaged in the 2013 Act will continue to be paid. What has altered are 2 things. You first of all undermine the principle of prior informed consent by doing away with the social impact clause. And secondly, and this may be worse, when you do away with the social impact clause, how do you work out the compensation for non-land owners who are also affected? Because often there are non-landowners whose livelihood is affected when land is acquired. Those are two deep concerns you aren't talking about.
See, the owners of the land are getting adequately compensated by way of employment, by way of annual compensation, and by way of market price. So saying that market price would not be there. The fundamental to this act is that you will be paid twice or 4 times the market price. So financial compensation is not an issue which is there for anybody. The issue is opportunity cost. If you are going to have a social impact and a consent clause which will delay a project of, say, by 10 years or 5 years, is this good for the country?
Okay.
If there is a composite work plan by the government for development.
Let Madhuresh Kumar answer that question. He's making a very interesting point.
Currently, mass acquisition is history now, because then the cost involved for mass acquisition was peanuts. Today, with the compensation package which is defined in this act, believe me, no government can even think about mass acquisition, let alone trying to create infrastructure not required or which will entail.
It's not the government, it's private companies coming into industrial corridors. Mr. Mittal, it's not the government, it's private companies operating in industrial corridors, particularly corridors like you heard from Madhuresh Kumar that end up covering 14% of India. Narrow that down and you'll do away with a lot of the opposition.
Currently, no, that's not true. The industrial corridor, along with the railway line, is acquired by the government of India and not by any private individual.
But it's given to them.
I'm amazed where this entire story of private individuals comes.
It's given to them. I would only like to say that 3 things. And with Mr. Kumar.